This week's parsha is the most important parsha in the entire Torah. You may ask, why is this week's parsha the most important in the entire Torah? Well, let me tell you. Parashah Shalach contains the most tragic episode in the entire Torah, one that reverberates throughout Jewish history. We read about Moshe sending men from each tribe to tour the land. We read about the negative report 10 of them bring back, and the positive report from Caleb and Joshua. We see a rebellion begin, a decree of wandering 40 years in the desert, and we get several new mitzvot. But none of that is why this is the most important parsha in the Torah. The reason this is the most important parsha is because it builds another layer of the relationship between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. I'm going to get meta for a moment and give you some behind the scenes on the making of these videos. For some parashot, I know weeks in advance what theme I want to focus on. Other times I don't hit on the idea until spending some time reading and learning that parsha and the commentaries on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday of that week. But then there are parashot like this one, where I think I know exactly what I want to be talking about weeks in advance, but then something makes me change my topic at the last minute. Some people refer to this week's parsha as parashah Techelet. It's at the end of this week's parsha that we read the mitzvah of tzitzit, attaching fringes to the corners of your garments, and those fringes should contain a thread of techelet, a special blue-colored dye. From the time the Jewish people received that mitzvah until sometime shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple, every garment that had tzitzit would have techelet. But for various reasons, the source of that techelet dye got lost, and for close to 2,000 years, tzitzit were all white, because we didn't know how to make techelet. But in the past 50 or so years, supported by halachic, scientific, and archaeological evidence, we have rediscovered the source of techelet as the murex trunculus. We are the first generation in close to 2,000 years who have been able to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit in its most ideal way. Techelet is a deeply personal mitzvah for me, and is what I wanted to offer as the reason for this being the most important parsha in the entire Torah. But then, something happened. I've read and learned this parsha many, many times over years. But when I was reading it over earlier this week, one verse jumped out at me. It's not that I never noticed this particular verse before, but it just hit me differently this year. When the spies returned and gave their negative report, the people rallied against Moshe and Aaron. Caleb and Joshua tried intervening, but the people were in full-on rebellion mode. Then we read the line that jumped out at me, chapter 14, verse 10. As the whole community threatened to pelt them with stones, the spirit of Hashem appeared in the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. Now we know the classic understanding of that verse, that the spirit of Hashem appearing was in defense of Moshe and Aaron, as if to tell the people to back off because Hashem will fight on behalf of Moshe and Aaron. It's a threat against the people who were about to stone Moshe and Aaron. But as I read that verse this year, for some reason, it didn't feel threatening. When I read, the spirit of Hashem appeared in the tent of meeting to all the Israelites, it feels positive, it feels hopeful. Elsewhere in the Torah, whenever the spirit of Hashem appears to all the Israelites, it's in a positive context. One of the beauties of Torah study is that two contradictory interpretations could both be true at the same time. So let's put the classic interpretation of that verse aside and consider what it could possibly mean to interpret that verse in the positive. If we reread what happened just before this passage, the report of the Meraglim, we see something else that hits differently this year. What exactly was the report that the Meraglim brought? We read, "We came to the land you sent us to. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and these are its fruits, holding up grapes and figs and pomegranates so large they needed multiple people to carry them. However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful and the cities are fortified." Basically, the message is, it's a great land, but it's dangerous. There's economic opportunity, but you'll have to work for it. It's the place we're supposed to be, but it's a different standard of living than you're used to in the desert, being fed directly from heaven. The report is an honest assessment of the situation, the good and the bad. And what the people should have said was, for breakfast this morning we ate manna from heaven. Clearly Hashem is with us and we can overcome the negatives and claim our destiny. But instead they latched onto those negatives and decided not to move forward. And reading that, I couldn't shake the feeling that this sounds familiar. People today want to go and visit Israel, but they're worried about their safety and the difficulties finding flights. People want to make Aliyah, but are worried about the cost of living. They want to live in Eretz Yisrael, but don't want to give up the comfortable lives that they've already built for themselves. They know where they need to be, but they latch onto the perceived negatives and use those as an excuse towards maintaining the status quo. But how is that a positive? That would cause the Spirit of Hashem to appear in the tent of meeting before all the Israelites. Perhaps the fact that someone is wrestling with that decision means deep down they know where they belong. There'd be no wrestling to do otherwise. They may be wrestling with the reality and the implications of that realization, but they know that Eretz Yisrael is our destiny, as much today as it was 3,500 years ago in this week's Parsha. And perhaps that realization, that internal struggle, is in and of itself holy and worthy of the Spirit of Hashem appearing in the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. That is one reason why this is the most important Parsha in the entire Torah. But the other reason is that the most important piece of Torah is whatever piece of Torah you have in front of you right now. Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisroel Chai.